Yes, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once more to this stakeholder engagement session. We are now on to the second session of this afternoon, where I would like to consider the draft civil aviation licensing of air services regulations. To allow us to go through the draft civil aviation licensing of air services regulations, we are joined by Nicholas Muhoya. Nicholas Muhoya is the Manager Air Transport at the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority and the Acting Director Aviation Safety and Security Regulations. So Mr. Muhoya will take us through the preliminary interventions on the regulations, and then we will go into an in-depth review of the matrix on the draft civil aviation regulation. So please allow me to welcome Mr. Muhoya to take the stage.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nicholas Muhoya, current manager air transport, and also acting director aviation safety, security, and regulations. Welcome on board on this particular review of regulations for licensing of air services for 2018, which we are reviewing. Hopefully, it will be license of air services regulations 2021. And we have a few amendments, and the main idea of having this review is mostly to bring to the laws into a proper understanding between the operator and also the regulator, so that when we have the regulations are properly explained. Number two, to meet the gaps that have been missing during the time of operationalization of these regulations. There are quite a number of regulations that have been reviewed, but in total we are talking about 20 points in terms of regulations, but affected regulations is from the first regulation all the way from definition all the way to the fourth schedule. So we'll have one of our officers, that's Madam Beth Mwakio. She will help us to go through the matrix, and I believe that some of you have already looked through it, and we have received some comments, and we'll try as much as possible to incorporate all these comments into the regulations. Some of them are advisory, others are substantive, and those that are comments in terms of issues to do with formatting of regulations or spelling or other repetitions, such things, is good that you bring them up in case we have not captured, because we have shared both the matrix and also we have shared also the draft formatted regulation in the new format. So we will try as much as possible to include your comments, and where your comments may find that they may not be appropriate or can be handled, maybe in advisory circular, we shall have that done. Of course, not everything that is comments or proposals. Some of them may have difficulties in terms of implementation. So we'll use the correct wisdom to ensure that we incorporate any substantive regulation in this review. So I don't want to say much. I will now welcome my dear, my fellow colleague, that is Beth Mwakio, to take us from here. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Beth Mwakio, as you have been told. I will be taking you through the amendments that we have made on the draft regulations licensing of air services. It's not uploading. I am assuming that
as the air transport officer takes over to take us through the matrix, we will go through the same format. We will deal with the matrix of regulations. That is, you'll be taken through the rundown of the 20 or so points that Mr. Muhoya has alluded to. And then after that, we will then go to the section where we will be able to respond to what we've already received by way of feedback. And finally, we will open up the stage where we can have a dialogue, where you can be able to ask questions and we respond. Asking questions, like I said, you only need to indicate in the ask a question section, and we will be able to give you the stage where you can ask a question. I note that already we have one comment on this regulation from Alioma, talking about consideration of the term damp leasing in the definition. I think as we go along in review of this regulation and presentation of this matrix, we will be able to respond to how we would consider that proposal made by Omar. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, we are considering the draft Civil Aviation Licensing of Air Services Regulations 2021. And these will be presented to you by Beth. Beth is one of our air transport officers, a senior air transport officer, and she'll be able to take us through this process. Beth, carry on.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon once again. My name is Beth Mwakio. I will be taking you through the Civil Aviation Licensing of Air Services Regulations amendments. As you can see on my screen, the amendments are highlighted in red, and most of the amendments in part 1 and 2 were just for formatting. On the arrangement of regulations, there was the title competition between undertakings, which had been left out, and therefore that is what we included under the arrangement of regulations. On the part 1, preliminary provisions, the amendments were minor, and you can see on regulation 2, we included to use various of its corporate identity elements and a franchise agreement. That was basically just to align the definition with the document 9626, that is manual on the regulation of international air transport rather. The other amendment, as highlighted in red, was a definition. This definition was not provided for in the previous regulations. Therefore, we included aircraft interchange, and the reference is provided. The other definitions that we included were interchange agreement, which is a leasing agreement which permits an air carrier to dry lease and take or relinquish operational control of an aircraft to or from an air operator at an airport for a limited duration. That definition was not provided for in the previous regulations, and therefore we have included it. The other definition we have included is for subcharter, as indicated, which means a wet lease in by an air service operator from an air service operator in his, her, or its own right on the short notice for a period not exceeding 5 consecutive days. This had not been provided for in the previous regulations. The other term that we have included is a definition for code share, as indicated, and the reference is provided. There is operational control, which is the exercise of authority over the initiation, continuation, diversion, or termination of a flight in the interest of the safety of the aircraft or the regularity or efficiency of the flight. That had not been provided for. I take note of someone who had noticed that the definition for lease had not been provided for, and therefore I want to confirm that that has been provided for in this regulation. Equally, we added the definition for lessor. We have also added a definition for lessee. A definition for approved training organization has also been provided for. The other amendment that was made is in part 2, that is licensing of internal air services. Regulation 7 was deleted owing to the fact that the market is already liberalized, and therefore Regulation 7, Subregulation 3A and B were deleted. Regulation 10, there was the change in the marginal note that was reading operating without a license prohibited, and therefore that was changed, or rather it is being proposed to be changed to read prohibition of operating without a license. Regulation 13, Subregulation 5, there were words that were included and others were deleted, and therefore we deleted the words cause to be published and included the words develop and documents and publish, just to make it more clear. So this was done for clarity. Under general provisions, you note Regulation 19, Subregulation 5. The amendment there was deleting the word eighth and replacing it with the word fourth, which is the correct schedule. The previous regulation was referring to the wrong number of the schedule. Therefore, the fourth schedule is the correct one. Regulation 21, Subregulation 1A, there is the insertion of the word commencement and route to clarify that the services are already licensed. The intention here is to make sure that this regulation is addressing someone who already has a license, as opposed to previously it was just reading operations of, it wasn't clear on whether the person has a license or not. On Regulation 21, Subregulation 1B, there is deletion of the word type and category, and included change in the provision of air service over a period of 6 months, which represents more than 50%, to guide on what substantial scale of activities in terms of carriage of passengers and all cargo would require notification. That is to show what substantial change it is that we are referring to that requires an operator to notify the authority. Therefore, 50%, as indicated and highlighted in red, is what we are referring to. Regulation 21, Subregulation 2, there is rephrasing of the entire statement just for clarity. Then we go to Regulation 21, Subregulation 3. We deleted the word new and return of the existing for cancellation. This is just for clarity, and the intention is to avoid cancellation of license before evaluation and consideration of an application. The regulation has been there, so we are just trying to rephrase it to clarify. Regulation 22, Subregulation 4, we amended it to extend the period from 6 to 12 months in order to allow the air carrier intending to transit to dry list to build capacity. And we also included conditions that the authority may consider while approving the wet list. This is about the wet list, and therefore we are saying the number of aircraft should be representing 50% of the aircraft that you already own while considering the application. Regulation 22, Subregulation 5, there is deletion of Regulation 22, 5A, B, C, and D, and replaced with a new Subregulation 5. The new subregulation reads, notwithstanding Subregulation 4, an air carrier requiring the services of a wet list aircraft beyond the wet list period shall make arrangements within the period of the approval to transit to dry leasing arrangements. Regulation 23, Subregulation 3, We included the word wet or dry just to make it more clearer on which kind of a lease we are talking about. Regulation 30, Subregulation 1, there was the inclusion of the word air service to make the statement read where an air carrier ceases operation of an air service for 6 consecutive months. Initially, an air service was not included, and therefore we just wanted to make it clearer that it is cessation of operations of an air service we are talking about in that regulation. On B, there was the inclusion of air carrier and operation of an air service. Again, these terms are included for clarity to read where an air carrier has not commenced operations of an air service within 6 months after issuance of the license. C was deleted due to the fact that the regulation is no longer applicable, or rather we are proposing to delete it. On the same On D, there is provided that in the case of death, the word death has been deleted because it has no impact on the license. Regulation 30, Subregulation 2 was deleted also. According to the authority, there is no need for this regulation. Regulation 31, Subregulation 1, the section was separated to be able to clarify on the obligations of the authority when it comes to varying the license. 1 reads vary any terms or conditions of a license on its own volition. Then 2, the authority may suspend, revoke, or cancel a license or any terms or conditions of a license. That is just to clarify the obligations of the authority when it comes to matters varying or suspension or revoking. Regulation 31, 2, there was the inclusion of in its own volition. Regulation 33, 1, there was inclusion. We included the requirement for an applicant to hold an air operator certificate or an approved training organization certificate. This is talking about application for a temporary license, and the inclusion of these words is just to create emphasis that for you to apply for a temporary license, then you must be a holder of an AOC or an ATO certificate. There is also inclusion of the requirements for a temporary license. This is just to guide the authority on what it is that should be considered while processing and approving issuance of a temporary license. Then there is also inclusion of requirement for the development of procedures in this regulation, in this issuance of the temporary air service license. That's an extra requirement that has been included. Regulation 34, Subregulation 1. This was to clarify the purpose of the short-term license. Previously in the regulations, the short-term license did not have the words ad hoc and did not have the words flight for foreign registered aircraft. And therefore, this regulation has been amended to create clarity on the duration for issuing short-term license and the fact that a short-term license is an ad hoc kind of a permit issued to a foreign registered aircraft. The separation is that for commercial operations, the 7 consecutive days remain. But for non-commercial operations, we have extended the period to 14 consecutive days because non-commercial operations do not have much effect. There is also an inclusion of proviso in the regulation. In Subregulation 3, we have amended to include a bullet A in the Subregulation 3, which makes reference to Subregulation 1A, commercial operations. Then subregulation 5, there is inclusion of the word for commercial operations after deleting the word this. This was done to create clarity and to indicate it is for commercial operations only. Regulation 37, there was a replacement of the word or with and. The word or does not provide for charges for both categories of air services and aircraft, and therefore the word and has been included to show the effect that the regulation was supposed to have when it comes to charging, that it is both category of air services and category of aircraft. It is the same in the entire regulation. Where there is O, we have replaced with and. Regulation 40, Subregulation 2, there is the proposal to include the letters A and LI, Lima, India, in the words agreement and license. They were missing in the previous regulation, so that is just a formatting and typo kind of an error. Regulation 43, it's a marginal note. We are proposing to cancel the word surrender because it doesn't have an effect on the cancellation of the license. Regulation 43.1, there is the inclusion of in writing and the license shall stand cancelled. That when us shall notify the authority in writing, and then the license shall stand cancelled. This has been proposed for deletion in the text. That is provided that where owing to death, incapacity, bankruptcy, sequestration, or liquidation of the holder of a license, or to the appointment of a receiver or manager or trustee in relation to the business of the holder, he or she ceases to operate the air service authorized by the license, then if the business of the holder is being carried on by some other person, that the person shall forthwith notify the authority, and unless an application has been made within 14 days for a new license, shall return the license for cancellation. That has been proposed for deletion. Regulation 48, Subregulation 1. We are proposing to include the words license for scheduled air service shall. This is because tickets are only issued for scheduled air services, not for non-scheduled. So the inclusion of the words for scheduled air service is for clarity to indicate that tickets apply on scheduled air services. Then Regulation 49, Subregulation 2, there is proposal to include additional requirements omitted in the previous regulations, that is dates of issue and date of flight. Regulation 49, 2G, we are proposing to change the bullet number from G to H, that is formatting and it's minor. Regulation 51, we are proposing to include the word or cargo or both where applicable. Regulation 50, Subregulation 1, again, just a formatting. We are including the word and cargo in the marginal note. The same as Regulation 50, Subregulation 3, inclusion of or cargo as highlighted in red, or both where applicable. Regulation 51, 1, there is an amendment to align the regulation with ICAO liability limits as revised from time to time. This is on insurance, and therefore we are changing from the previous text to indicate that a licensee shall be insured at all times to a minimum amount equivalent to air carriage liability limits set from time to time by ICAO under the Montreal Convention of 1999 in respect of passenger, baggage, cargo, and mail. Regulation 53A, that is Part 5, franchising. We're just adding the word air operator certificate and delete the word "and" at the end of the sentence to make provision for a franchise between approved AOC holders. 53B, it's an arrangement of the words in the sentence to include the words where the franchisor is, rather, to include the words where the franchisor in order to make provision for foreign airline requirements to qualify as a franchisor to a local operator. Regulation 61(2)(a), there is the inclusion of the words and unreasonably high or low air rates, airfares. This is just to show the scope of malpractices that lead to abuse of dominant position that can also be unreasonably high or low. Regulation 63, we are including a comma, that is just a formatting amendment. And also at the end of the sentence, we are putting and another relevant factor to accommodate for any other factors that may be existing out there. We have a new regulation on advertising, that is Regulation 67, which was not there, and therefore we have provided for that. And it reads that a person shall not advertise any air service which has not been licensed by the authority. And 2, a licensee shall not make any statements, either in writing or orally, about itself that is false or is designed to mislead any person. So that Regulation 67 was not provided for. We have added, and also a marginal note, reading prohibition of advertising without an air service license. And therefore, from there, because we had another Regulation 67 previously, from 68, it's just an amendment of the numbers to be aligned to now the current provision. After 67, we go to 68, 69. So each is changing to the new number, 69 to 70, up to Regulation 74, which becomes Regulation 75. Another amendment is in the first schedule under the categories of air services. We are proposing to have a subheading. The previous first schedule was not having subheadings, and it looked a bit clumsy, and therefore we have provided for the subheadings as international and domestic. We have also amended Part B, that is non-scheduled air service, to provide for the numbering, where the first type of service did not have a number. So the international air services have 1 and domestic is number 2. This is just formatting again. Under C, we have deleted the words with a limit of 4 flights in a program. This is because this can be determined by the market forces, and therefore we are removing the limitation to 4 flights to just open it up, let the market prevailing conditions be able to determine. The other inclusion is air under D, that is the previous regulation was reading emergency medical service. We are including air to read emergency medical air services for clarity. There is Part C, which is aerial work services. We have added seeding under the F, where it was only cloud and spraying. So we added seeding, rather cloud spraying. We added seeding. Then under Part D, it was just an alignment, and therefore it's a minor change for formatting. We are also changing E for alignment, which was inappropriate. Then the word microlight has been deleted from the regulations because microlights are not licensed. The second schedule, we are adding Regulation 19 as highlighted to ensure that the requirements that you publish the authority with certain documents is considered under this regulation, because this had been left out, and therefore there were some requirements that some operators would feel they are not supposed to submit because it had not been included. Under scheduled air services, we are including the requirement for number of aircraft, type of aircraft, and ownership details. This had been left out. Under 2, that is non-scheduled air services and aerial work, we are including number of aircraft again to be used, types, and ownership details, just for clarity and to make sure that everyone is able to read and understand what is required of them. 2 is a formatting. 3, we are including a similar text, that is number of aircraft to be used, types, and ownership details. Under 3E, we are including flight as highlighted in red, just to make it clearer that we are talking about flight instructions and not another type of instruction. Under 3, we are adding the word "the" to make sure that we are referring to that flight instructions, not another flight instruction. 3H2, we are including each flight instruction. This is just for clarity as you submit your statistics. Under 4, these are the documents to be submitted with an application. The inclusion is minor, but it's very key, where we are saying that all the documents that are submitted to the authority, if they are copies, they must be certified as true copies of the certificates. And then we added documentary evidence of an aircraft purchase, which had not been provided for in the previous regulations. Under D, we are adding the words "where applicable," just for clarity. And the same D, no, and after D, we include, sorry, I beg your pardon. Under 4, documents to be submitted with application, we are including H, which is a requirement for an operator to submit certificate of registration form when applying for licenses. This had not been provided for in the previous regulations. Then again, just for emphasis and clarity, we are requesting for certified true copies of any document in addition to whatever is required of you, especially audited financial accounts. In the same 4 documents to be submitted with the application, we are asking certified true copies of air operator certificate that has been issued by the state of the applicant, just in case it's a foreign applicant. Under the 3rd schedule, this is categorization of the aircraft. This has been changed to indicate the weights of the aircraft. Under light, there is medium, and then there is heavy. Then there is helicopter categorization, which has light and heavy. There is balloons, and there is under balloons, we have light and heavy too. So this basically was just to create a classification of the aircraft categories that we are going to be considering when issuing licenses. Under the 4th schedule, we are including the word "and other relevant factors," just to include "and other factors that may exist." Part B, that is information to be provided by existing license holders, audited accounts for the previous financial year, and where applicable, the most recent internal management accounts. We are deleting the words "if necessary" and replacing with the words "where applicable," owing to the fact that there could be an applicant who has management accounts and not audited financial accounts. Then again under B, we are requesting to rearrange the sentence just for clarity and delete the words proposed before takeover and modification in. Again under particulars to be published, we are including the words, we are inserting new subheading for the type of service and type of aircraft to be used, and change the numbering from alphabet to numerical. As you can see, we have written 1, name and address of the applicant, that is under column 4. Then 2, proposed base of operation for the service. 3, proposed type of service and type of aircraft to be used. And then there is the alphabets A, B, and C. Under the 9th schedule, we have included the word certified true copy for emphasis and to make sure that the copies that are submitted to the authority, they are then certified as true copies of the original. Under W, it's also again an inclusion of the word true. From there, we delete the repeated word and the prospective franchise. Thank you very much. I hand over back to the moderator.
Thank you, Beth. I think we can now consider the questions that have been presented in the questions. Yes, the questions that have been considered, that are posted to us in the questions part. So we have a number of questions. The first question being, and I think my colleagues then would consider and give us answers to these questions. Ali Omar is asking that we consider defining the term damp lease. I think it's something that we would respond to. We also have a question regarding a recommendation from Omar again, that licenses should be given as per aircraft category and not type. So again, colleagues, you'll look at that and find and give us a solution. Gidai Mwaniki is talking about Regulation 22 regarding Weightless, and he has requested for the floor. So I will not consider the question now, and we will only consider it after we allow him the floor and he expounds on his concern. We have also a recommendation from Gad Kamau regarding that applications are being denied, applicants being denied approval without justification. This has been interpreted to mean there was some interference. Of course, we are requesting that if he has any text that would go into the regulation that would contain that situation. But again, also he has noted that there is need for applicants to be given reason for non-approval. Again, it is important to note that the current regulation allow an applicant to apply to the authority to be given the reasons for denial in writing. Again, probably Gad, you might want to take the floor and articulate your point so that we can be able to appreciate where it's coming from and the best way to address it. Ali Omar has also raised the fact that Regulation 67 conflicts with the AOC and Admin Regulation 109. And I think that one we will look at both of them and align so that we ensure that there's no conflict. Ali Omar has also raised the fact that advertising should be limited to successful acquisition of AOC. I'll allow my colleagues to respond to that. I don't know how best to deal with that. I think, Gad, you are articulating the concern about notifying unsuccessful applicants. Like I said, the best approach, let's allow you space to articulate that point in the discussion period. And then Joseph Minor is saying proposal to make it an offense or clear in the regulation that operators cannot file false or misleading audited financial accounts for management accounts that show financial health, but in the real sense, they are unable to meet their various obligations that make it unsafe to operate. Thank you very much, Joseph. We will consider that. Then I can see Ali Omar has also says that fees should be charged in local currency. This should be added in the regulation. I think my colleagues will respond to why some of the fees are charged in dollars. And then Gad Kamau has made his feelings known regarding his opinion on audited accounts. And so I'll allow my colleagues to respond. I don't know who would want to go first. So Mr. Muhoya, probably you'll take the stage and provide a response to the questions that have been presented to us.
Yes, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is, I'll try and answer as many as I can at this moment. And I think the moderator has actually replied to some of them. So I'll not take time to those I have, that he has. The first one is by Gad Kamau, an individual who has no business with my audited accounts, had knowledge of the contents. That's one, I would say, Mr. Gad Kamau, that is be a very unfortunate thing, because I believe the CA holds everything with integrity. So if there is that part that it came from the CA, that would be a very unfortunate scenario. I would say that we don't believe that should be coming from the authority. But if you have any evidence that it came from the authority, we would appreciate to know the information and know how that matter can be handled. Okay, the other point is that's Omar. I propose that fees should be charged in local currency. This should be added as a regulation. I think as we all know that we are not only Kenya, we are also international in terms of areas of ad hoc permits. That's where we demand, or rather, payments be made in foreign currency. But also when you are paying payments here, we find that also other operators are doing in terms of international currency. So we'd like to make we shall discuss this internally and work with our finance department and see how best to handle this matter, because of the currency fluctuations, hard currency fluctuations. That's the Kenya shilling against the hard currency fluctuations. It becomes very difficult. So the best thing is see whether you'll be able to be getting a regular rate, so that you know the rate is in hard currency. The example, if something is to be paid $50, then you can pay in local currency. We shall coordinate with our finance department, but the rate will be, it is $50. Whatever way, whether you pay in Kenyan shilling or you pay in dollars, the amount remains $50. I think that's what we are saying because of the fluctuation of currency. We will liaise with our finance department and see how best to handle this matter. The other one is proposal to make it an offense to clear in the regulations that that operators cannot file false or misleading audited financial accounts or management accounts that show financial health, but in the real sense they are unable to meet various obligations that make it unsafe to operate. I think that's okay. That one has been answered, so I'm not going to add that. Anytime you make false application, the Act provides that you are liable, and there are liable penalties for making false allegations. So that one is already handled. You can go to the next one. So God Kamau has said about chapter 4 of the Constitution, and I think that's already there, and I believe I believe that that can be interpreted by legal people for access of information. Of course, there is cost of giving information. So your cost is not denied, but you have to ensure that you may meet the cost of providing that particular information. Okay, the other part is God Kamau has hence an application that is not approved should be accompanied with a written explanation on the applicant as to reasons of non-approval. That is a constitutional requirement. This is it is well answered already, and it provides that you will be given the reason, but the issue of writing why you are denied, it's provided for, and the regulations allows you to know the right. But writing why you are denied as a part of automatic reason, sometimes it doesn't. It will be difficult at all times, because people have very what do you call it? Applications have been coming with a lot of problems, and people don't write, or rather, the applicant may not write the correct things. So that one has happened many times. Example, somebody does not give all the details that are required, or they do not show financial capability, or they don't show that they have competence in many ways. So this information will be forwarded. What I would not maybe agree with is the part that you were saying about interference. That is, the question about denial has been like because of interference. I believe this has not been the case, and if he has any proof, we'll be glad to know that somebody was denied unjustifiably. That would be very pleased to know who was denied unjustifiably, and not to put politics to this business. This business is normally done on the table, and if the reason is not there, then the person is ready to go to the tribunal, because the law provides for that you can go straight to the tribunal, where you can bring your complaints and show that the CA justifiably denied you a license. The other part is question on 22, Regulation 22 on waitlist. That is a request to present my proposal on this behalf. So that one we will ask you to do it. Briefly, we shall give you time for that. Okay. This one is important that we will consider, but nonetheless, we have categories, and we shall find out how best we will handle this, and we will sit down and look whether we are able to accept type and category as opposed to category as opposed to type. We'll look at that and see the pros and cons of having that. The other part is Ali Omar about dumplings. I think that one is something we shall look into. We have debated quite a bit on that, and then we shall see how to get dumplings. Most of it, we expect that to be given in air transport, in AOC, or during AOC, because I don't think we'll be able to give a dumplings for you to have a license to do dumplings. That is a tall order to have a license on dumplings. But what you can do is when you do a lease without the dumplings, it will be something we will consider. But AOC operations, we'll look at that. Okay, I think I've answered. Maybe my colleague here can maybe add to some of those questions. That is Madam Beth Makio. If you are ready, you want to say something, continue.
I just want to also appreciate the comments that we have received from private consultant in civil aviation. This is one of the stakeholders that presented us with their comments in writing, and therefore I would also encourage other stakeholders to send us their comments. There was a request on Regulation 2 that we include airway bills. There was also a request on Regulation 3, marginal note. The consultant is saying that this marginal note is very appropriate. Ironically, a similar marginal note at Regulation 10 has been changed inappropriately. Inconsistency in the two marginal notes is inappropriate indeed. And therefore, we have received many comments, but I just wanted to assure the stakeholder that we have not neglected your contributions. They are very valuable and we are going to consider them. There is also a proposal you're giving us on Regulation 11 under procedures for processing applications for license. You're proposing that the obligations for the authority to develop procedures for processing applications has no timelines, and therefore leaves one wondering where or not the procedures have been developed. In practice, applications are already processed in accordance with established procedures. That is part 3. And you're proposing that it could read, the authority shall process applications in accordance with established procedures. I just wanted to assure you that we are working on that. And if you read our proposal, this has been captured. So we are working on that particular regulation to ensure that procedures are established. Under Regulation 12F, the requirement of 2 years previous domestic license as a condition for international license. You have a feeling that this is unfair. However, I would like to clarify that the regulation reads 1 year, not 2 years. But we will review your proposal and see where we can accommodate it. Under Regulation 13, authorization of foreign scheduled international service. It is noted with regrets that the authority has not operationalized this provision under their mandate. That is being addressed. I just wanted to make you aware that we are working on that. And the authorization soon will be implemented because procedures are underway. Regulation 13, schedule of requirements for foreign applicants for international scheduled air service. Your proposal is that the authority to establish schedule of particulars to be supplied by applicants and applicable application and license fee, just like is the case with other applicants, though a proviso could be made for exemption of fees on a reciprocal basis. Thank you very much for your comments, and we are going to be reviewing them and including what we find possible into our into our regulations. Thank you very much. Back to the moderator.
Thank you very much. I think we have had an extensive response to the questions that we have received in the Ask Your Questions and as well as what we was sent to us earlier. So I have 3 requests for the floor, and I'll give it in the sequence in which they were requested. We have Gidaya Mwaniki, who has a question. I will be giving him an opportunity to speak first, followed by Gad Kamau and Ali Omar in that order. So Gidaya Mwaniki, if you are ready, I'll allow you to speak, and please keep your question precise on to the point so that we can be able to address the pertinent issues. Gidaya, are you ready? I've invited you so you can click on participate. Thank you very much. You can go ahead.
Okay, I will restrict my recommendations on basically 5 items. First is on Regulation 22, as proposed, as it indicates that the proposal is to extend it to 12 months. 12 months. Yes, I would like to recommend that there be an addition to this to make it that it's 12 months, and that any further extensions should be based on an appraisal of the preparation of the operator to get the dry lease, so that to cater for situations where 12 months, even after 12 months, another addition of 12, another addition may be requested by the operator, so that even if it's 12 months, that any further renewals should be based on an application based on appraisal of the applicant to get to dry lease. My second recommendation regards to the section on Regulation 33(1). If it is possible to have a definition of what public interest is, because that may vary from place to place. So it's very important to know, to have a definition in the definition tabs of what public interest means. That is based on the 2 items as indicated in the matrix form as submitted. Then I also have a recommendation, because this is an ongoing issue, that we have a clause to indicate clearly on the terms of variation. I believe that in the current regulations and even in the proposed regulations, we don't have a clear definition of terms of variation. And my proposal, and I will be making it in writing just after this, is that we have a specific regulation that indicates the terms which are allowable for variation. And they should be as it is now, to be on a type of air service, that you can do a variation for a type of air service, for addition for an aircraft, addition of a route, geographical area, or to vary any other condition. And that as regards to variation, that the fees remain as they are right now. We will not be recommending any change on the grounds of cost of variation. This is it's an issue that the authority now is interpreting differently, and it is not the current new interpretation of grounds for variation is not being supported by any clear regulation in the current regulations. Then in terms of conduct of meetings, on the procedure for objections, we should have clear procedures for objections with detailed reason, and that if there's any objection which is based on an applicant opposing based on competition, then the assessment of competition should not be left to KCA. It should be left to the Competition Authority of Kenya to determine whether there is the enough number of players in that area, because KCA should be restricted to matters of safety. But if there's a determination to be made in terms of the number of players offering a service, then that determination should be made by the Competition Authority of Kenya. Then my fourth input is on the third schedule, on the classes of aircraft. What the matrix form as it currently indicates is, it just indicates balloon. And you know, from the operators here, we believe that that should be corrected to indicate hot air balloon, because other balloons which are not classified as aircraft. So just for clarity again, I believe that can be misinterpreted, and it should be, the authority should indicate hot air to confirm that they're talking about hot air balloons which are recognized as aircraft and and can be licensed to provide an air service. Then last but not least is on regulation 3031, where the authority requires that a license to be cancelled if the operator has not begun operations within 6 months. Where our proposal from the East African Commercial Aviation Association is that this clause should be changed, and it should be to 12 months. 12 months that the license should cancel after 12 months if the operator has not begun operations, and this be subject to a response from the Flight Operations Department on the status of the AOC application. That is my recommendation, so that the license should not should be allowed to stay for 12 months, and even after the 12 months, it should be considered for renewal, not as a new applicant, but based on the status of the AOC application. And flight operations should be able to give a report to air transport regarding that issue. So those are my contributions. The five contributions as indicated, and shortly after this, we'll be making them in writing so that they be considered as such. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gidai. I think that was an elaborate and comprehensive presentation. Colleagues have taken note and they will respond. Let us allow Gad Kamau to present his interventions, so that when we get to respond, we can get to respond to all the interventions in one bundle. So Gad Kamau, I have sent an invitation. When you're ready, please click on participate and make your interventions.
Mr. Chairman, how do you read?
Go ahead. We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Oh, you can hear me. Okay, thank you. Just a quick one. I'll be real quick. The government bodies are supposed to align their regulations with the Constitution. I just want to read what I posted there. Section 47, every person is administrative action. Every person has a right to administrative action that is expeditious, efficient, lawful, reasonable, and procedurally fair. Number 2, it says, if a right or fundamental freedom of a person has been or is likely to be adversely affected by administrative action, the person has a right to be given written reasons for the action. Now, when you're supposed to be given something, there's no fee to it. So if you apply for a ASL license, pretty much the application fee should cover the reply to you whether it's approved or not, and an explanation. And when a right is infringed upon, and this time it is the right to work, It is everybody's right to work. When a right is infringed upon, written reasons for that action need to be provided to the applicant. Now, that's one. Number two, it's been proposed that 6 months when you get your ASL, you should start your ops. I totally disagree. We've had no operations here since March 2019. In fact, anyone who got an ASL beyond 2019, because we've not gone back to full operations, that 6 months should be suspended. And when we go back to full ops, that is the time that we will come up with the 6 months. There is a misrepresentation, or there's a perception that every time we shut down the airspace and for a period, when we open it up, that there is going to be a flood of people wanting to fly. That is not the case, especially in tourism. Once you shut down the airspace, you have lost that season. That season is gone. That year is gone, finished. And you have to scrap whatever you find on the sidelines. That is my proposal. I mean, suspend those 6 months until we go back to normal. It's unfair, the current atmosphere, to get someone who's got an ASL license, brand new, and ask him to start operations in 6 months. Even to get an AOC is difficult, because there was a time they had suspended visits by the regulator to the industry. Now, on the other side, I would like us to discuss at some point is exactly where KQ stands in this. Now, KQ is leaning towards the government. It's common knowledge. This is common knowledge that the government has an interest of protecting KQ's business. A lot of operators who go head to head with KQ find the going tough and difficult. So this is where I came back and said, well, there's some interference, because a lot of operators have gone ahead and requested for ASL licenses that seemed to give competition to the national carrier. And those licenses have not been approved, and no reason is given. Because if my application is not approved and no reason is given, how will I apply the next one? Where did I go wrong? What do I need to fix? Is the paperwork dirty? Is some figures there that don't make sense? What is the problem? That must be furnished, and it must be furnished freely. It must be furnished freely. One, because the application fee should cover for it, and two, because it's a constitutional right. That is what I have for the time. Mr. Chairman, I thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Gad, for your extensive questions. I think my colleagues have taken notes. So finally, we would like to listen to Ali Omar. Ali Omar had asked for the stage to clarify one or two things. I have activated your participate button. You will click participate. You can be able to ask the question. Mr. Ali Omar.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity. Good afternoon, everyone. I would just want to weigh on my points that I proposed. On regulation 67, that you covered. Then on the other issue of the charges, you see, I propose we have in the regulation, you know, a clear law that says for domestic operators, they'll be subjected to the domestic currency. Assuming you're a domestic operator, you're operating in Kenya, you know, but however, you're subjected to pay foreign currency, and you know, you should be charged the same way. For people who have FOCs, people who are flying outside, bringing in revenue into the country, those ones may be subjected to foreign currency. But we are operating within the borders of Kenya. We are paid not in foreign currency. I think this is an opportunity where the regulator is taking advantage of the fact that it's receiving money in US dollars, and they will enjoy the currency conversion. We should limit, or we should put a requirement where operators pay for all operators operating within Kenya. We should be able to pay in Kenya shillings, and not that the finance in KCA will determine the dollar rate and subject us to a conversion figure. I think that it's very unfair for the regulator even to propose that. The regulator should be patriotic and encourage use of the local currency. Then on the point where the authority requires us to submit financials, I don't understand why. How are financials related to management of air safety? If you wanted to know if an operator is safe or not, you have periodic reviews, you have audits that the different departments undertake. Over and above that, we also submit the numbers to air transport, on the loads we carry. So I think I would want to agree with GAD, unless maybe we add a data protection clause in the regulation that the data obtained from operators in regards to financial will only be used for matters flight safety, and not that this data can be picked by any other government organ to be used for any other reason. So that I would like to ask the authority to consider that. And on my other point is the issue for the subcharter. The subcharter issue, the way it has been defined, I would like to understand why 5 days. I would like to subcharter aircraft maybe for reasons of maintenance. A maintenance for my Dash 8 would be about 7 days or 2 weeks, or 3 months for a C check. I propose we limit the issue of the subcharter to a quarter of dry lease duration or wet lease duration, which is maybe 12 months. A quarter of that, maybe 3 months or 6 months. That is a bit fair. So just in the event you have a major technical, you can still meet the obligation of your clients with that leeway. 5 days is too limiting. And then we have Regulation 22. On the issue for Regulation 22, I would like to first talk about Regulation 22.4. The authority may, upon request by an area carrier, approve an operation of an aircraft under a wet lease arrangement to meet temporary and exceptional requirements of an ongoing air service operation for a period not exceeding 12 months. I would like to ask, why are we putting a limitation of not exceeding 12 months? If 12 months finishes, we need to be able to renew. So sometimes we might not have capacity to buy, but we have capacity to operate. Maybe limited to operation, or the wet lease, we limit it to an operator, a Kenyan operator, where you give business back to another AOC who can do the same operation. Then I'll go to Regulation 22.4a. The number of wet leased aircraft shall not exceed 50% of the Kenyan registered aircraft from the applicant's air operator certificate of 5 aircraft, whichever is less. So if I want to expand my operation, I don't want to take, I just don't understand this regulation. Wet lease is acceptable in the law. It is something recognized, and it does not have limits. But now we are restricting it, and we are, I agree if we restrict it to only domestic operators, but if I want to support another operator, or an operator is in a position to support me, instead of the equipment sitting on ground, the operator might decide to operate for us, and maybe that could be a basis of a charter business. because if Gad Kamau has 3 Beechcrafts 350s sitting on ground, and we approach him for him to give us an operation, why would you limit Gad Kamau in generating revenue? He's as a charterer, he's doing commercial operations, and we allow him to partner with a scheduled operator because he's in the business of operating King Airs, and I'm in the business of operating Dash 8s. I would not want to complicate my operation, and he would not want to complicate. So we have an agreement. I don't know. I think it's something that needs to be given flexibility. So where we are allowed to renew, and KCA needs to look into the numbers, the limitations they've put. I don't know, 50%. At least I should be having a no aircraft. Then that makes sense. Of course, I wouldn't advocate for someone to get a waitlist with no aircrafts. You see, commitment is to have aircrafts, at least an existing operator with at least a minimum of 1 aircraft. Look into that subregulation is a bit restrictive. So with that, I would like to end there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Omar. I think we've had you. I'll just probably, before I hand over to my colleagues to respond, I just indicate, number one, access to audited accounts by the authority is purely for the purposes of the functions of the authority. And I think as a body corporate and as a government agency, we have limitations in what we can do with the information we get. So probably I'm yet to clearly appreciate the fears that why a regulated entity would be resistant to give its primary regulator some information. I still find it a bit interesting, but my understanding is that any information the CA obtains, whether they come and inspect you physically and find you have bought another aircraft, or whether they get your audited accounts, is purely for purposes of the functions of the authority as outlined in the Civil Aviation Act, and not for any other function. And where that happens, then you have a recourse to address that. In terms of currency, we are in a global business. Aviation is a global business. Unfortunately, some of the charges we have to levy them in dollars. However, I'm certain that our finance department confirms that they are able to receive your fee in Kenya shillings. Now, you are a player in this industry and you appreciate what IATA does in terms of giving a periodic US dollar conversion rate. And we, as the regulators, we use that rate because the rate of operators that is determined by IATA. So where we have a fee chargeable in Kenya in dollars, that rate is applicable if you are willing to pay in terms of Kenya shillings. And I'm sure our finance department is very much capable of taking care of that. Finally, my only comment on the issue of lease is you realize you are talking about an interchange of aircraft between you and another local operator. That is fine and good. But picture a scenario where we are talking about a wait list of an aircraft coming from another country. And I have an operator with 1 aircraft, and then he goes and wait leases 10 aircraft. So 10 wait list aircraft means how many pilots are flying it from foreign countries and how many crew. Picture that and ask yourself if that is growing this industry. So that is where I leave my personal comments and allow the colleagues from air transport to be able to respond to the list of comments all the way from what Gidaya Mwaniki had proposed.
Yes, good afternoon again. Thank you for the contributions. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, Mr. Mkono, for those comments. And also thank you, everybody, for those who have contributed. Your comments are well received and noted. There was the first one by Mr. Gidaya Mwaniki, and that is extension of 12 months. To be done after an appraisal. I think that's something we'll look at that, and has been there before. In fact, if you understand some extensions, you have to have a substantive explanation and why you need extra extensions. The other part is definition of public interest. I think we agree. We will try and see how best to have that in the context of civil aviation. And we try to look for that definition in many government circles. It has been a challenge. And therefore, we try and see if there's any acceptable definition that may be interpreted in the context of civil aviation. The other terms is the word variation. I know I may try and understand the issue where you're coming from. And the variation of a license, I think we shall try and see how to capture it best. But not everything that is in the regulation can be put in regulation. Most of it can also be put in orders or ACs, aeronautical, or rather advisory circulars. So we can have some of those procedures well enumerated in the advisory circulars. Of course, you talked about fees remaining as they are. I think they are. We have the fees has not changed, and we have not changed the what you call the regulatory fees. The circular has remained the same. The other part was about the competition, and I would say this: you may not deny the fact that the civil aviation is given the mandate to regulate and economically regulate the civil aviation growth in Kenya. And in that case, if there are issues of competition, I would say that we are in an MOU with the competition authority. And in that case, in case of any issue that we find that we may not be able to handle, we'll give to competition authority to give an interpretation. But of course, there are issues of, example, dumping of prices so that you kill another airline. Those are things that the CA may be able to see directly on your pricing. And of course, in liaison with the competition authority, we may be able to look at that. The issue of KCAA cannot regulate economy or economic regulation as opposed to safety. That was very interesting. I would say that also we also regulate the economic development of aviation in Kenya. And you remember we have also Ministry of Transport that talks about BASA, Bilateral Air Services Agreement of external operators. Then you may have external operators coming through licensing. And also we may have operators who may have unsafe operation because they don't have finances. And those are airlines operating under distress in terms of, and somebody also coming in and bringing, applying for a license, and it does not have money or finances or resources to operate a safe operation. So that's why we may need, or we need in our regulation to show that you have the muscle to operate a safe operation because you have the resources. You'll not be cutting corners in maintenance, and also you'll not be cutting corners in training. You shall not be cutting corners in all aspects of safety in terms of the provisions of a safe operation when you come to the AOC. So that's very important, and we cannot maybe license somebody who has zero money in their account, and people apply for a license for the sake of applying. And the other part is you talking about that schedule. that schedule is okay. We will look at that. It's about including the word hot air balloon. That's a viable recommendation that we think is important to incorporate. The other part was Regulation 330(1), about that is extension of it to 12 months. Maybe my colleague here can remind me. Yeah, you talked about the license is cancelled after 6 months. Actually, the license lapses. It's not cancelled. It elapses after 6 months. And that is something we also had a long debate about, whether you should allow 6 months or should allow 12 months. But for a new applicant, where there was that debate, and we may want to, since it's come from the floor, then we can consider to see whether it is viable to extend for a new aircraft. But if it's somebody who is already operating and you stop operation for 6 months, that means your license will lapse. But somebody who has not started operation, he's still going through the certification process. I think that's another thought that we have, that if you do not operate after being given a license for 1 year, that is a consideration we are looking at. Now, the other part is, I think this we got from Mr. Gad Kamau on the regulation about the rights. I believe everybody knows about the Constitution, and it's true, everybody has a right to know. But I was intrigued, of course, by your comment that somebody is denied the right to work. KCA will not deny anybody a license because of other operators or protection of other operators. I would say that all the people who have been denied or license was not issued some rights is because they did not show competency, or they did not meet the application requirements. For example, you didn't provide the percentage. The law talks about 51% should be Kenyan. It's ownership, and yet you do not show that. So that one can lead to you not meeting the regulatory requirements. Also showing that you have the aircraft, you apply an aircraft, you apply for a license, and the law requires that you have a dry list, you own or dry list for that aircraft to be included in the license. And you find some people would not show they own, and they will not show the dry leasing. Some even will try to give wet leasing. You cannot be given a license on wet lease. The law is clear on that aspect. So I would be very interested personally to know which airline or which applicant was denied for any other reason other than not meeting the regulatory requirements. The issue of KQ, I would say that more borders on politics. I would not maybe answer that one, but I believe there is nobody who has been denied because of competition, especially a local applicant being denied because of competition. That is far-fetched, and I don't think any member of the board, I think you can approach any member of the KCA approving licensing committee of the board, and I would be interested to hear whether there will be any contrary opinion to what I have told you. Maybe from there on, I'll go to Mr. Omar. That is on currency. Then that Mr. Amkono had much about about currency. So I don't want to repeat on that. About data protection also, I think that has been handled. And about waitlist and the sub-charter. Waitlist for sure has also been handled in the sense that you waitlist because according to the law, maybe I read paragraph 4. Why do you waitlist? Waitlist means that you only give a person who has let me read it for you. Paragraph 4 says the authority may, upon request of an air carrier, approve operation of an aircraft under a waitlist arrangement to meet temporary and exceptional requirements of an ongoing air service operation for a period not exceeding 12 months, provided that, of course, all the other part. I'm going to read the rest. But what we are looking at is this. You are licensed and you're already operating. However, you get into a technical issue where the aircraft is not available from your regular operations. Therefore, you take a wait list to take care maybe for maintenance or to take care of a sudden surge of business and for a particular time or season, then you can wait list. And you know the complications of wait list is that you are hiring somebody to carry your cargo or to carry your passengers. So they are using your call sign, but the aircraft is not under you, and the crew are not yours, and that brings a bit of a complication. Therefore, if a foreigner comes and he carries, we may be encouraging something called a briefcase licensed operator, whereby you are given a license. You don't need to set up your own AOC, and at that point you can call anybody, say, start hawking your license and say, I have the right to this route and therefore come and carry for me. And that can be a very dangerous kind of operation. Therefore, you should remember this is for a temporary and exceptional circumstances of an ongoing service when you get a wait list. I think that should be the spirit, so that we have competent people, because the training, the aircraft registration and others we can be given our business to external people, or eternally you own a license but you don't have capacity, you make others do that job for you. So that is an important part to consider. I don't want to explain much. I may have left one or two issues that may need clarification. I have Madam Beth Mwakio here. I think if she's when she can be able to add one or two items. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mhoya. I think you have covered everything well. I just want to emphasize on the fact that these are economic regulations. The licenses, the regulations we are talking about are not about air safety. They are about the economic regulation of the industry, and therefore we should be able to detach or somehow separate management of air safety from management of economic regulation. The other thing I wanted to appreciate is what Githai has given us. It's very commentable. However, I also wanted to make a clarification on the fact that variation of a license to include an aircraft or a route does not attract fee, as you may have alluded. But when you vary to include a service, that means you're seeking for a new service totally. That will attract a new fee. If you have a service and you're just including a type of an aircraft or a route that you did not have in the previous license, then that remains the way it was. The other clarification I would like to make is on the charter by Ali Omar. He commented something on why did we consider 5 days and not 3 months. I would say this is we were just, borrowing from best practices from other states. However, we are interested in listening to the industry and we are open to your opinions. Therefore, your proposal for 3 months is welcome, and we welcome many more so that we can now sit and evaluate and maybe be able to reach an appropriate duration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, colleagues. I think we have fairly exhausted the questions that were posed by the speakers who took the floor. And similarly, we continue to consider the questions or the comments that were posted in the Ask New Question box. So what we will promise to do is we will consolidate your views, especially those that touch on the substance of the regulation, and be able to incorporate them to the greatest extent possible. And in the final draft, we will revert with how far we have been able to incorporate your input, and where we have not, again, as is your right, we will be able to explain or provide some pointer on why we went the other way. As indicated by Beth, these are air services licensing of air services regulations, which are more of economic regulations rather than the safety or technical safety or security regulations. Having said that, and I have not seen a new question in the question box, I can see Omar would like to respond, but I hope we're getting new information so that we do not spend most of the time back and forth on the same issues. We might hold different opinion, but as is, so I'll allow Omar two minutes, just 2 minutes, so that you can make your intervention. Omar, are you there?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. I would just want to respond to my senior on the issue of waitlist. You see, I'm looking at two definitions of waitlist, a definition from KO and also a definition from guidance material on best industry practice from IATA. A waitlist, a lease where the lessor provides an aircraft with crew maintenance and insurance, also known as an ACMI. The aircraft is operated under the AOC of the lessor. There is no definition where the wait list talks about, temporary, emergency. It clearly just says it is being operated under the AOC of the lessor. Of course, the points that have been raised are valid. We would not want business to go outside the country. However, we can further define, because this is the law. My senior has quoted the current regulation, and that's why we are here to review what works for us as the industry. And I would encourage we further define maybe the wait list into international wait lists for people who have FOCs, and domestic wait lists for people who have local AOCs. And that way, maybe we can cover a scenario where we support each other here. Of course, as you had said, there was an issue for interchange, but let's work within that. But, the way it has come out is like, you're telling us this is the law and this is what it is. But I want to correct my senior that this is the time we're reviewing the law. And the law does not limit us on emergency in terms of the definition of the wait list. And if it does, these are the proposals from the industry that we need to improve on this law so that it can work for all of us. I may want to, contract another Kenyan operator. I want to use the word Kenyan so that the jobs are kept secure in our country. However, can we work on this regulation so that we can accommodate these other definitions? Because the definitions doesn't cover an aircraft an aircraft that is grounded. It just says an ACMI, and we are all aware sometimes we get a lot of ACMI work around, which is not a subcharter. It's it's long-term operation, which is supportive to our business. So that's my 2 cents on it. But I believe this is the time we are reviewing the law, and if the law does not work for us, so long as it is not an ICAO requirement, I think it is best to review and see if it can work for every other Kenyan out there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Omar. I think your sentiments are well heard. I would like you maybe to make a proposition and put it in writing, and then we see how best to incorporate what your suggestions. The only thing I would say is that the definition in our regulation remains the same. That's the same as that which is in ICAO or in IATA. Definition remains the same, whether ACMI or whatever, definition remains the same. But is how much we are going to allow that operation. And that's why you have brought the difference between local operators and also international operators. And that's what we would like to see your proposal. Of course, number 2 is take into the perspective of an ASL, and where you take a perspective of an operator who has a license and would like to use a license without getting an expansion of their own AOC. So that's a place where we also need to make sure that the license is used properly as you make your proposal. Thank you very much. Now towards having a proper AOC that has that capacity. So the definition we have the same, but it's the use of the ACMI or the weightless that we are looking on how to handle it within our regulation. Thank you very much. I wish to rest my case.
Thank you, Nicholas. I think, Omar, that is explicit. You are invited to give us written submission, and any of the participants who might have an opinion on any of the deliberations you've had today, please give us your written submission. You can prepare a written submission, even a proposed text, how you want it to appear. Share with us on KCAS at 2021, KCAS 2021 at kcaa.or.ke. As we come to the end of today, it has been the second day of our stakeholder engagement. We have considered 5 sets of regulation today with a review of 1 that we did yesterday. So today we can talk about having reviewed at least 6 sets of regulations. Tomorrow is another day where we have another 6 sets of regulations to look at. We will be looking at airworthiness regulations. We're looking at approved maintenance organization, aircraft nationality and registration marks, carbon offsetting reduction scheme for international air transport, certification of air navigation services providers, and aeronautical information services regulations. So the plate is full tomorrow at 8 o'clock. We begin with airworthiness regulations. We'd like to thank all of you who have been able to be patient and endure the day up to this late hour. And we hope to engage with you again tomorrow and request that those who have an interest in any of the sets of regulations we've highlighted for tomorrow, if you can give us advance comments, that makes our interactions much easier and much more engaging. Otherwise, thank you very much. And we wish you a blessed evening, and we hope to see you again tomorrow. Thank you.